you.
Yeah, I'm sure you do.
When you say you don't much like it that I'm here,
Good morning, Ed. How are you this morning?
well, all right, Daddy Hugh. How are
Oh,
you?
fine. Okay. Well, I'm so glad you're here. I want you to know that.
Yeah,
All right.
I love it when you lie to me.
I got to turn around and go back.
Okay.
Now you'll get my backsides. I took a documentary on me last night.
You did.
And, his son is in school in graduate school.
Into that walk a little bit.
That's it.
That's it. How you doing? Get tired?
Just a little bit. I'll do a 30 minutes if you ask me to, but I won't volunteer.
That's all right. We'll do some exercises.
You made it back?
Made it back, second trip. Okay, now into the apartment. Goodbye.
You're starting to look like an old man.
Oh yeah, that's exactly what I is. Don't look like a artist. I think Bob Slaughter commented about things itching. Bob Slaughter going through a similar situation in mine. They did operate on his prostate, and he said that took longer to get healed up than other things. But anyway,
So your lower back is itching?
you want me to walk? I'm gonna put
Well,
my
yeah, hang on just a second. I've got to put your shoes
put
on.
my shoes on.
Yeah. All right, so the pain is in all the way across the lower back, just not just in the hip?
Across the back, but definitely it centers on the hip.
Okay, and what kind
High up on the hip.
and what kind of number would you give that as far as pain goes?
Maybe a 3, 2 for the most part.
Okay.
So, but in the last week, it's something new.
Okay. You're taking pain medication still? So you taking any pain?
I don't think I'm taking any pain
Okay.
medication.
All right.
Take
So-
the Tylenol PM,
But that's it?
but then that, of course, wears off.
That's not Tylenol PM and not a pain medicine.
All righty. Got your basket on there.
Yeah. I want to do something with those empties. Can you use them?
No.
I hate to throw things away.
I
like
know,
that.
especially like that, because as soon as you throw them away, then you'll think of a use that you could have had for them.
This shoe, here's like a marker.
Okay.
Slide up and down.
Do you want me to get it for you? So you don't have to lean over so far.
I don't know if that strap will help enough. It won't hurt anyway. Thank you.
Okay, let's do the other one too. Does that feel okay?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
I got you.
Good for you now.
Good morning. I'm doing well.
All right, we're here again with the nearly world famous Hugh Wills.
Is it on?
It is. It is on. But we're going to kind of bounce around on some storytelling with you. And at Jeannie's request, she says, you have a funny story of during World War II when you were under fire and you were driving a Jeep. And some of the guys gave you a hard time saying they weren't sure which was worse, riding with the risk of riding with you or being shot at. I don't know this story.
Well, it starts. We went up a little mountain road into the first part of the town, and we were told to hold up for the night.
In what country? Belgium?
This was in Luxembourg, I think. Anyway, Luxembourg or Belgium, Germany, right in that general area. It was right at the beginning of the Battle of the Bulge, and the American forces did not know where the German forces were, except that they had made a wedge in between the 9th Army and the 3rd Army. Well, we were in the 9th Army, and we were told trucks came up right after supper time, and we were loaded up and told, and went through the 1st Army headquarters, and their their truck depot was wired to blow because they didn't want the Germans to get the trucks and the gasoline if they moved in that direction. At any rate, they were told us to move on out until we met the Germans. Well, we went up this little mountain, the Glaze, Belgium, now I remember. And we told to hold up for the night right at the edge of town, which we did. Well, I set my switchboard up in a little house which had a bay window in the dining room of the little house. And I'd been up half the night, and early that morning, the bay window just exploded and disintegrated. And I looked out the window to see what was going on. And there was a German tank half a block up the road. I said, let's get the hell out of here. So we packed up the switchboard and went out the back door. The story is, there was a fellow, an old man, all 35 years old, from Tennessee, and he would go around between the two houses and pop the German out of the tank, his head sticking up at the top of the tank. He'd pop him and run around, and the next German stick his head up, he'd pop him out from the other side. Now, whether this is a true story or not, but I believe it. At any rate, we went on down toward the mountainside, and there was a monastery, a small monastery there, and I think it was a monastery for nuns only. But at any rate, I put my pack on the floor and my head on the pack and went to sleep. I'd been up most of the night, and all of a sudden a commotion, and I waked up, and they said, everybody out of here, and everybody for himself. I said, what in the world is going on? Well, I went to the door, and my captain was standing there, and he said, who's going to take these 2 Jeeps? Well, one Jeep was an artillery spotter who disappeared, and the other was an engineer officer who disappeared. And a fellow behind me, Clark from California, said, I'll take one. I said, Captain, I'll take the other one. Clark, you go first. So Clark drove his car out, and he had to do a backslide of 45-degree angle. And the American tanks, they were called tank destroyers. They had open turrets, and they were backing up down the highway. Well, Clark managed to get in and get between the tanks and go on down the mountain, and I did too. And I saw tracers coming across the highway. Well, I think if there's 100 bullets, there's 20 traces, and you can see there's 80 more bullets where the traces are. Anyway, I got down halfway down the mountain, and I realized I had no brakes. I had already bumped into Clark, and there was a culvert with a little house up on the side of the hill, and I put my right wheel in the ditch. I had a trailer on the back of the thing too, loaded, and two guys were riding on a trailer, and I knew I had to stop before I got to the foot of the mountain. I'd run into somebody. Well, I ran into that little culvert. Well, that stopped the Jeep, and the guys bobbed off, and they said, "We don't like your driving. We're going somewhere else." Well, I don't remember now whether I got the Jeep out or anyway. A week later, we came back to that same location, that same little village, the Glade, and we had overcome the Germans, and we chased them to the river, and the 82nd Airborne, as I was told, shot the Germans up as they went down the river. They took one of our colonels with them, Colonel McGowan, and he was a feisty old rascal anyway. But anyway, we got back into town, and there was about 120, not just American soldiers, but our own buddies that we had been associated with all the time. And so we freed them, and there was an equal number of automobiles, German vehicles, that they had abandoned because they ran out of gas. Well, one of the two of the vehicles were American vehicles that they had captured in North Africa and brought all the way into Germany with them. One of them had a bad gas tank, and the other one had a bad fuel pump. Well, my sergeant and I, on Christmas Day, I well remember Christmas Eve. I'll get back to that. But on Christmas Day, Sergeant and I took the fuel pump off the one with the bad gas tank. We figured we couldn't fix the gas tank. And we got the other one running, and there was an old command car, like a open top driver and a seat beside the driver up front, and another seat in the back for a command for a colonel or a general or somebody like that. And it normally had two radios in, one for the forward area, one for the rear area. Well, anyway, we got this command car and got a big trailer hooked to it, and we used it from then on to the end of the war, and to carry our telephone wire supplies and so forth. And we called it the Black Widow. Now, I don't know why they called it the Black Widow, but they did. But anyway, somewhere along the line, I was telling the fellows about driving down that with a machine gun bullet cover. And they said, "Yeah, we saw you driving down there like this with your head over your head." Well, that's supposed to be a funny story, so that's all I have. Click it off. I've got to think of something to say.
I'd like for you to talk a little bit about post-World War II era when you came back to the States, and you told us last night in kind of your work history and how you decided to go back to school and that sort of thing. But once you got past your time at VPI, then
I went to work selling fuller brushes. I went to work for Henry St. Clair, and he was going out of business. He didn't know it. He was alcoholic. He spending all his money on booze, and he hired me and sent me out to make rounds. I had been around with him, went around with the rounds on one occasion.
Was this Fuller Brush or?
No, this is Henry St. Clair.
And what did he do?
He was a broker, a grocery broker. And during the war, he had a good sugar account, and he could sell sugar. People would buy sugar as long as he could supply it, so he could sell as much sugar as he can get his hands on from the sugar market. And then he sold off-brand tomato soup and that type of thing. And as soon as the war was over, the Camels came back, and he couldn't sell his off-brand anymore. So he went out of business. And his wife fired me, and I came home, and the Fuller Brush man was on the front porch talking to sister. So I met him, and he said, actually, I'm a boss man of this area, and I'm looking for somebody to take this area. You live this area, you must know a lot of people. Well, I didn't give him a yes right then, but I did call him back. He didn't expect me to call back, but I did. And so he put me to work, and I sold Fuller Brushes for almost 22 months. And I was selling Fuller Brush when I met Mama. Met your mother.
And how and where did you meet her?
Well, I met her at her date went out to find girls for some of his buddies, and I picked his date up at the hospital where her mother was had an operation and it wasn't healing. She was diabetic and it wasn't healing right, so she was still a patient in the hospital. And I went and asked for Miss Blackard, and I told her who I was, and I was to pick her up because her date was out looking for girls for the other guy. So she and I and my date went to the dance and sat there and sat there and sat there. I didn't want to dance with my date and leave her alone at the table, and I didn't want to dance with her and have my date thinking the same thing. So finally, the guy showed up, and I danced with my date, and then I danced with your mother. Well, I don't want to put this on film, but she kind of pressed herself close to me. And so that's why I guess I got out of the car, and then she came and gave me a kiss before she went to the house with her date to the front porch.
This was at the end of the evening.
At the end of the evening, I took her home. I took my date home first, you see. Ordinarily, you do that all the way around. Take your own date home by yourself.
And you had a car.
I had the car.
Was it the 41 Chrysler?
About 41 Chrysler. Now, where you want me to start?
Well, continuing on, after you met her that night.
I had this in the other story. I told the fellow Joe Young, I said, I like your date. I think I'll call her for a date. And he took umbrage at that. And I said, oh, I was just kidding. But he's still a little ticked off as the thought that I would try to cut him out, see. He had met her in summer school at Roanoke College. She went to summer school for some reason or other. Took Spanish, I think. And she met Joe Young in the class.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a friend of Marvin, my friend I worked with at Western Electric, Marvin Mabes. That's a whole nother story about Marvin.
Was Marvin from Roanoke?
Yeah. And he was in D Company with Bob Slaughter and lived through it.
Huh.
And
So, okay, after you said to Joe Young, I think I'd like to ask your date out. And
well, I did. I called her for a date, and she gave me one. And we dated a little bit. Then I found out she had a date with Joe Young at the University of Virginia dance. And she was going to ride the train to Waynesboro, and her brother was going to take her from Waynesboro to Charlottesville. The train from Roanoke didn't go through Charlottesville. It went on up the pike to New York City, actually. But it didn't go through Charlottesville.
yeah, went right up the Shenandoah Valley.
Yeah. And so he was to meet her at the train station, however, and her brother was supposed to have brought her to the train station. Well, that was the fact that I took her to the train station instead of her riding the train was a fib. So I realized then that she was capable of telling falsehood if she wanted to.
So you dropped her off at the train station, and
Then I went around to my friend, who the night before the dance, and they had a little party going, and I danced with several girls, and he told me some of the girls were loose and they would take advantage of me, and I kissed some girl on the dance floor, and I looked up, and my friend was looking at me, and I don't know now whether it was his wife I kissed or somebody else, but at any rate, we went to the dance the next night, and his wife, for some reason, she took umbrage with me because I had turned her down. I forgot now the details, but she was mad. And I escorted her to the ladies' room. I danced with her, and she said, I got to go to the ladies. And somehow she got out and left me standing there, waiting for her to come out. Finally, I went on back, and she was dancing with her husband. Well, I went back that night and slept on the couch, but the next morning I got out of there as fast as I could. And I came back to the university, to the dormitory, not dormitory, but the suite area. He was a senior student. And just as I parked, Margaret ran across and said, Mr. Wills. I said, oh. And she said, something's happened to Joe. I wonder what happened. Said, he got arrested, and they put him on the top bunk, and he fell out and busted his head in the police station. He said his buddies have got him in there, trying to get him in shape to go. He got to go to Peter Court at such and such time this morning. She said they won't let me in there because it's a student dorm. It's a male dorm. And so she got in my car and waited, and I went in, and they were in the men's room, and they were fixing him up, trying to put powder on his wounded head. And the funny part, the judge said, what were you doing, Mr. Young, what were you doing out in the middle of the street? He said, I was trying to kind of cab. The judge said, from what I reported, you were directing traffic. And so the judge was going to fine him, but if he, that's the crazy thing, as I've been told. The students at University of Virginia don't drink legally. If any of them gets accused legally of drinking, they have to leave the class. And he was a senior. Well, the judge knew all this. They didn't want to put the charge on him if he didn't absolutely have to, you know. So I think he got away with that. But at any rate, some of his buddies took him after the trial, and they had a trailer. And that afternoon, they invited me up to the trailer, and the two friends, the husband and wife, knew that Joe wanted to be alone with his girlfriend. And they invited me to take them for a ride. Well, I knew what was going on, but I didn't know how to. But they decided that the best way for her to get back to Salem was to go back with me. And I didn't have to suggest it. So she rode back with me. As far as I know, she didn't have another date with Joe Young. He ran off and left her in the somebody's bedroom. All a bunch of people there, and he ran and left her. And one of his girls, she told me, tried to put the make on her. And finally, she got home, and Joe had the key to the house she was staying in, and she had to ring the bell and get the lady up there who let her in the middle of the night. That's what she told me. But from then on out, as far as I know, she never had another date with Joe.
And so once she's back in Salem, was she teaching then?
She was teaching, and we began to date regularly, and became serious. And so I bought a ring and asked her to marry me, and she said she would, and blah blah blah, and
blah blah blah.
Well, after that, and she was nervous in front of the preacher. I held her hand and she was ready to back out, but she didn't. And her brothers were usher, and it was only a small wedding, small friends only family wedding.
It was the Episcopal. You were married at the Episcopal Church in Salem, and I can't remember
St. Paul.
St. Paul's.
St. Paul Episcopal Church in Salem.
So where was the honeymoon?
Oh, we went to Natural Bridge for the first night, and then we went from there. Her daddy had a friend who ran the concession stand in the restaurant at Hungry Mother Park reservation, and we couldn't get official apartment or cabin except from weekend to weekend. We couldn't get it from the middle of the week to the middle of the week. So she said, "I know Mr. So and so. What was the name of the girl that?" And the boy spent the night with you out at Bennett Springs. He was about your age. And out on the back porch before we put the bathroom in, the mother's friend, what was her name?
Oh, Betty.
Betty Abbott. Betty
Wyatt.
Betty Wyatt. Well, this was Betty Wyatt's daddy.
Okay.
And because we were sitting on the sand in front of the lake, and he came up and said, "And how long have you been married?" And I said 3 days or something like that. Well, later he divorced his wife, and Miss Blackett didn't like the new wife at all, but she had to be nice to her. And he brought the new wife around, and I said, "And how long have you been married?" And put it right back to him. But I never saw Mr. White except that one time there at the reservation, and later when he came to visit the Blackards.
So were you selling fuller brushes when you got married?
Mm-hmm. And just before Betty was born, I quit and went to work for Yale in Town.
And for those that don't know who Yale in Town is or was,
Yale in Town's a lock company, a premier lock company. Yale Lock was the Cadillac of locks.
and at the Salem plant, they produced
They
locks,
produced
keys.
locks for automobile and cabinets, file cabinets, locks on file, push-pull like on a file cabinet. And
And when you started there, what was your job?
I was the very lowest job they had. I would the rejects, tore them apart and reused the parts as best you could. They went back in the production line, and there were two of us on the desk doing that, and one of them had lost both legs in the war. I don't know what happened to him.
And then as you moved up, what did you move up
I
to?
moved up to a dispatcher, and if it was a small order, I'd get the parts together and take them to the foreman. If it was a big order, they just kept the parts rolling. Then I became foreman of the storeroom, and I had the dispatchers under me, and as well as a couple of laborers.
And which is a transition kind of scenario. They had a credit union.
They had a credit union, and I became on the credit committee. I don't think, I may have been on the board of directors, and I met Garland Keeling and liked what I saw and heard about the credit union movement throughout, and so I applied, and
And who was Garland Keeling?
Garland Keeling, you asking me because the tape doesn't know. Garland Keeling was the managing director of the Virginia Credit Union League, and he was in charge of hiring and firing employees for the league. Is this thing running?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it is? I didn't know it was running. I'll pause in. That, most of that was after I got married, wasn't it?
Yeah, a lot of it.
Hmm.
A lot of it. And so you left Yale in town when?
Right at the time, I left Yale in town after you were born. So I worked at Yale in town 6 years. I think I'm right about that. I left Yale in town I went to work for Yale in town in 50 or 50. Must have been 54, or 56. I went to work for Yale in town in 56 and left them in 62, went with Virginia Credit Union in 60. No, that's not right. That's when I went to Lynchburg.
Right.
Actually, I didn't want this thing running. You still running?
No, it's not running.
You lying.
I'm lying.
Well,
yeah, you
anyway, I worked for Yale in town
until 56.
6 years. And then I went with Virginia Credit Union League in 56. And for $500, I could have gotten a loan at the Bank of Salem, First and Merchants Bank of Salem. But for lack of $500, they wouldn't lend me the money to buy. No, that's not right. I bought the house, first house. I paid $1,000 down and assumed the mortgage. A little house up on the hill
It was in Salem. It was called Mountain Avenue.
Mountain Avenue. Anyway, it was a small white house, and we thought about enlarging the house all the way around. We put a front on it, we put a back on it, and put a side on it, but we never hit the nail on the head. We just talked about it, and later we bought the house on Bowman Avenue, a big old farmhouse, and that's when I asked the bank to lend me the money, and they said no. I went to the first savings and loan in Roanoke, and in 2 weeks after I applied, I was in the house. They loaned me the money, and I had $5,000. No, that's another house. They loaned me the money, and I moved. I had some money. Oh, I had a second mortgage on the first house, and Uncle Lester loaned me what I needed as down payment for the house. The second mortgage was more than the money that Uncle Lester left me, but he said the difference was it should have been a 5% note, and it was the second mortgage was a 4.5% note. And that the difference made up that half. So Uncle Lester had a good deal. But if he hadn't loaned me the money, I was up the creek, you see. So I was glad enough
that was to get into the first house.
I was having to get into the Bowman Avenue house.
Oh, okay. Second house.
Second house. We lived there, 6 years, I think. 50. I took the job with Virginia Credit Union League and moved in Bowman Avenue in the same week. it was Labor Day weekend, and I was supposed to go to work on the first of the month. I went on the second because I knew that was the first of the month was a holiday, and Garland immediately took me to Norfolk. And I spent the week running around credit unions in the Norfolk, Newport News, Portsmouth area, and back to Roanoke. And then I met up with Bill Atkins, who was the other field man, and he introduced me to some other places. And I went back to the Norfolk area, and then Garland took me down to Bristol. And I met Oma Hashbarger, and Oma was a lady of, well, if she said something, you had to believe her. She couldn't make a mistake. At any rate, she was on the board, and I used to call on her as a field man. I would call on all the board members in my area. Bud Burton in Charlottesville was a board member, and I always called on Bud. Anyway, I worked for the Virginia Credit Union League. Well, I worked six years as a field man, and then they gave me the job of manager of Virginia League Central Credit Union. At that time, I moved to Lynchburg in '62, and Ed was in the second grade, Jeannie in the third grade, and Betty, I think, in the fifth grade, and all went to Camel County School. And later, Mother applied for a job as a substitute, and the Camel County school head of the schools, superintendent of school, saw that she was a degree applicant, so he gave her a job, and the job was at a 1 or 2 room school in a little village. Oh gosh, what's the name?
Evington.
And at one point she drove a station wagon which had straight drive to school, and she didn't know how to drive a straight drive, but she drove it anyway. And she was getting ready to come home, and car got away from her. Here the train came, and she just put on her brakes and held her breath, and fortunately the train missed her by 2-3 feet. Anyway, she said she would never drive that car again, and she didn't.
That was your little white 4-door Valiant.
I was a fighting for no value.
Yeah.
I sold it and wished afterward I hadn't sold it. I wished I had it back. But
You sold that one because it would bring more money. That's when you bought the brown station wagon after that.
Yeah, okay. Well, I don't know what. Maybe I cut it off. Pause a minute.
So talk a little more about Mama and teaching, because she moved from that school at Evington to Leesville Road at the end of that calendar year, that academic year.
I've forgotten what year it was, but she moved up to Evington, moved from Evington up to Leesville Road School to teach the 2nd or 3rd grade. And the previous teacher had a sick husband and asked for a leave of absence and thought that's what she got. All the other teachers and the principal thought the lady had a leave of absence and would be coming back. The lady didn't get a leave of absence, she got acquittal. And Mother got a regular job, but nobody knew that. Mother felt uncomfortable because the lady left stuff in the room that she said, no, I'll get these when I come back. My mother knew that she wasn't coming back. My mother being my wife, of course. My wife, Margaret. Later, she overcame that feeling that the other teachers thought she was at fault because the original teacher didn't get to come back. So she became a very respected teacher And when she finally quit, they put a plaque up honoring her, and had special invitation for me to come over and look at it after mother died. A little plaque of AAB up on the wall.
I never knew that.
Well, she quit because she was sick. She was diabetic all along. After Ed was born, she had to go on the needle. She didn't like to shoot herself, but she could when she had to. But when I was home, and which was most of the time, as I was manager of Lake Central Credit Union, but when I went out, I shot her most of the time, every morning. And then when Betty became about 16 years old in high school, Betty became diabetic and had to go on the needle. So every morning I shot both of them, and with insulin, of course. And later, she got to the point that her kidneys were going bad. And so she went to the hospital a couple of times because of that. And then they told her she needed to go on dialysis. Well, they told her two types of dialysis, the hemodialysis and the peritoneal dialysis. Well, we didn't know beans about which one was which, so the doctor decided to put her on peritoneal dialysis. All the organs float in your tummy in a big cavity called the peritoneal cavity. She was surgically implanted, a valve was surgically implanted in her tummy. And this valve was then attached to overhead feeding, not food, but stuff that would take care of her kidneys. And we had a little computer type thing in the hallway, and she could stay in her bed, go across the hallway to the bathroom, and not have to, the cords and tubes were long enough to do that. I would put her on the dialysis. At first we went on 2 nights on and 1 night off. Later, 13 months later, we got along fine for 13 months. Doing it this way, we would scrub it, and I'd shoot the bottles with insulin. Instead of shooting her, I'd shoot the bottles, and then that fluid would, like overhead feeding, would go through the computer, and the computer didn't touch the fluid, it just touched the tube. You cut the tube on or cut it off at the proper time to let the fluids go into her tummy, stay an hour, and then empty in a bag under the bed, and then reverse the process about 3 times during the night. But if for any reason she would roll over and mash the tube, the alarm would go off, and I'd jump up wondering what was going on, and I'd cut the thing off, and then find out what was going on and get everything started again. And I'd go halfway, fall back in bed again. But we got along fine for 13 months. And then after that, she got peritonitis, which is a very painful pain in the stomach. She was surgically took the tube out, and then she had to go on to hemodialysis. Well, hemodialysis takes about a week to fix a device in your arm, and she didn't have a week. She had to do it every night. So they had a tube of a yay long that went up her groin, and the doctor would put it in, fit that tube in. I had 3 doctors. The 2 doctors we liked were a little bit clumsy in putting that tube in her and finding the right vein in her groin. The doctor we didn't like slipped it in there with no problem at all. Anyway, she stayed on that for 2 or 3 weeks. Every day I'd take her from the hospital and take her to the dialysis center, and she'd lay on that hard gurney all day. And then when they took the needle out, the nurse would put her finger on that spot and hold it for a half hour and all of this, and then I'll take her back to the hospital. She was in the hospital when Jeannie was married. And I got permission, took her out of the hospital and brought her to the supper. And they gave no, it wasn't Jeannie's marriage, it was my retirement. It was my retirement. Anyway, they gave me a nice going away supper, about 35 or 40 people. And I could tell by the look on her face she was getting tired at the end. And so I bundled her up and took her back to the hospital when the party was really still going on in my favor. But I had to leave because she was later she developed heart failure due to the fact that the overhead feeding was not, even though it was heavier fluid, and every night it was not doing its job. And so the heart failure came around and she died. And of course, we all know about that. And that's been 20-some years, 23 years ago now. But she was a fine lady and a good wife, and I know she was a good mother. She sacrificed herself for her children. I know she did.
Yeah,
Right.
that's true. She did.
Pause.
That's true. Okay, let's kind of wind this session up if we can.
Well, this is the end of the tape, but at the beginning of the tape, I should have said, my name is Hugh Edwin Wills, son, sixth child of Richard Hardaway Wills Sr. and Margaret Estelle Bates Wills. My older sister was Elizabeth, who married Lester Roberts Ingleby. My number two sister was Martha, who married Charles Bernard Carper. Then came my brother Richard, and he married Mary Pogue. They had no children. Number three sister was Sarah, and redheaded, and known as Red all of her life. And she married Letcher Kirk Harvey Hall. And then the fourth sister, who was married before anybody else, was Estelle, and she married June Killinger. And they had one child, Bates Killinger, who is living today and a grandparent of his own making. Anyway, that establishes who I am.
Your oldest sister Elizabeth had.
My older sister Elizabeth had two children, Lydia, who married Sam Taylor, and Tom, who married two ladies. I won't give you their names. I can't think of them right at the moment. Martha had two children, Betsy Ann, and then several years later had a son, Charles Bernard Carper.
William Bernard.
William Bernard Carper, I beg your pardon.
Bill.
William Bernard, known as Bill. My number three sister had two children, Kirkland and Judy, and they're both married and have children. Number four sister I mentioned had one child, and then she died when he was 6, 7, 8 weeks old. She was married first and died first. My number four sister, and she died of colitis. They gave her an operation for colostomy, but she was so weak at that point that she wasn't able to go through the operation successfully. Well, she passed on early, only about 22 years old.
Do you recall any of the details of Aunt Elizabeth wanted to take Bates and raise him?
Yes, mother and my older sister had Bates as a baby after Estelle died for approximately a year. And his father was not making any payments towards the upkeep of the child. And when my mother asked him, he he said, well, my sisters, my two maiden sisters are going to take him and raise him. And they did. So, at approximately a year old, a little older, the two sisters took him and raised him. And he turned out to be a fine gentleman.